it's a really hard thing to start letting go and trusting other people to take care of things, because inevitably someone's not going to do a good job. You're going to have turnover. You're going to have to train somebody else to do it. So there are challenges, but overall, it's going to lead to a better quality of life.
Hi, guys, and welcome to the House Call Vet Cafe podcast. I'm Dr. Eve Harrison. I'm a full-time integrative concierge house call veterinarian in Los Angeles, and I help other vets to build their unique mobile practices on their terms. This podcast is for and by house call and mobile veterinarians, so it is meant to give our community a platform to connect, to share our stories, to lift each other up, and to support each other. Most of us work solo as lone wolves, right? So for me, it's been really powerful to be able to physically hear the voices of my colleagues from all over the world and to get a chance to feel that we truly are part of a community of very real other human beings who get it. While you may be alone in that little bubble of your own vehicle when you're on the road seeing patients, I welcome you to join our community by tuning into our own podcast when you're on your way to your next house call. Whether you're a super experienced house call vet with 30 years of experience, you're a brand new prospective house call vet just looking to get started, or you're house call curious, there will be something for you in this podcast. Each episode, you will hear interviews from other mobile veterinarians just like yourself who are doing unique and innovative things, vets who are sharing their stories, their struggles and challenges, and you can also look forward to hearing valuable information and perspectives from specialists and experts outside of our micro niche. And finally, if becoming a house call veterinarian is something that you've been thinking about exploring, or you're looking for some extra support getting your own mobile practice to feel more profitable and sustainable for you, check out the information in the show notes about my course and our above and beyond supportive private community for members only, plus our monthly group coaching sessions within the House Call Vet Academy. You can also check out my free public Facebook group, which is also called the House Call Vet Cafe, the same name as this podcast, and which is a warm and cozy community for mobile vets to support each other in professional and personal development, in creative entrepreneurship, and in friendship. So thank you guys for spending time with me today. Let's dive into the episode. Okay, welcome everyone. Today we have a cool episode with two vets joining us today, two extra awesome vets who are a dynamic duo who have co-founded the amazing company Chronos Vet. And I'm super excited to have these two amazing veterinarians with us today because they're both not only the founders of Chronos Vet, but they're both multi-practice owners with some history of house call practice as well and some mobile work in the specialty sense, which we'll get into as well. So I'm going to introduce our two special guests today. We have Dr. Jeremy Wentz and Dr. Phil Zeltzman with us today. So I want to tell you about these two marvelous fellows. Dr. Wentz has been a veterinarian for 20 years, living in Eastern Pennsylvania. He's a VMD like me, so whoop whoop, alma mater to UPenn. He's owned 3 brick-and-mortar practices. One was a 24-hour emergency referral practice. The other 2 are brick-and-mortar GP practices, and he sold 2 of them. He's currently enjoying only owning 1 practice now and continuing to run Chronos with his business partner and great friend, Phil Zeltzman. And we have Dr. Phil Zeltzman as well, and he is a board-certified surgeon also in Pennsylvania. He used to be a GP and a house call vet in his former life. He's co-owned 7 practices over the years. He's a serial entrepreneur, if you couldn't guess by now, with a severe case of what he calls shiny object syndrome. I understand that. He's also an international speaker. He's a consultant, blogger, and a ridiculously long list of other fun stuff. He is the co-founder of Chronos, which provides remote employees to vet practices nationwide. So welcome, guys. You're both pretty awesome, and I'm excited to have you guys on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the nice introduction, and pleasure to be with you for today.
Yeah, and I also wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for having Chronos sponsor our last House Call and Mobile Vet virtual conference. You guys sponsored as a platinum sponsor, and we couldn't have done it without your support. So thank you so much for being there for the conference and our community of house call vets. So yeah. So I wanted to dive in. The first question I wanted to ask you guys is the question that I always start out with, which is, what is your favorite snack to eat in the car on the way to work? Whether it's to a mobile surgery situation, a house call, or on the way to one of your 3 or 7 brick and mortar practices. What do you eat in the car?
So I'm an ice cream guy. So I don't go for the morning stop, but on the way home, there's nothing that ends the day better than a little bit of ice cream.
Yeah.
Ice cream one-handed, the other hand on the steering wheel.
Okay, so what flavor?
I'm a simple guy. I go with vanilla.
You can't go wrong with vanilla. And I want to add in, I'm also an ice cream fiend. I've been known to finish a pint of ice cream in one sitting multiple days in a row. So I hear you on the ice cream love. Very cool. What about you, Phil?
So if I'm driving, it's probably more likely to be some kind of trail mix or nuts.
Mm-hmm. Classic. Yeah, that's solid. A lot of house call vets, especially ones who've been on the podcast, are into trail mix and nuts. So that's solid. I approve.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm curious to ask you a few questions first, Phil, about what your journey has been like. So you mentioned that you've been in a past life a house call vet, and now you're a surgeon who, I guess, to sort of clarify, you're a mobile surgeon, meaning that you go from hospital to different hospitals and perform surgery there. So you're not mobile in the sense of going into people's homes and doing surgery on their kitchen counter, but you're mobile in the sense of traveling around and taking your show on the road. Can you tell me a little bit about those two aspects of how you practice and kind of how they came to be, the way they evolved?
Sure. You'd be surprised the number of calls I get from clients who think I can do surgery in their kitchen.
I mean, clients are insane. Like, we get questions on all sorts of things. Can you, yeah, you know.
So
what do you tell them? What do you tell them? Do you tell them?
I tell them no,
Fair.
politely.
Good.
So I started as a GP for 3 years and with a few opportunities to do house call work and euthanasia.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel strongly that colleagues who do euthanasias at home are heroes and saints. However, I wanted to be a surgeon, so that eventually led to the standard route, internship, residency, and then practice in a variety of states. So California, well, the whole journey. Do you want to know the whole journey?
I want
Georgia.
to know the whole journey. Let's hear it. That's why we're
Georgia.
here, right?
Yep. So Georgia, California, Illinois, Ohio, and Pennsylvania,
All right.
combined with New Jersey.
All right. Fun times. And so you had to get licensed in all of those states and everything.
Yeah, over the years, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was it that sort of led you to have a practice where you're kind of moving around and taking your show on the road with surgery?
It was sort of by force or by default. Let's just say that I left my previous employer on unhappy terms, and I won't share that in a semi-public setting. So it was really the only logical option. So I just stayed in Pennsylvania. It's the best thing I ever did.
That's so interesting that you say that, because it's such a common story for folks who are mobile and working solo as entrepreneurs. And many of us also kind of following in your footsteps of the serial entrepreneurship. And, once you get a taste of it, I can do this on my own. Why not keep doing it on my own? And, all projects can become an amazing entrepreneurial endeavor. But I very much relate to that. I had unhappy experiences at the institutions where I previously had been. And I think a lot of us folks who like to take our show on the road, whether it's into people's homes or into, other hospitals to provide our services, have felt that, we're equipped to do things our way more so than under the gaze of some other entity or boss or something like that. And so, a lot of us have very similar stories. So that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that.
So I gave you the short version, of course. Along the way, I had met Jeremy in another setting, and then we had the opportunity to take over general practice, which we'll talk about at some point, I'm sure, because that's where the genesis of Chronos started.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely have to dive into that for sure. And now I want to kind of hand the mic over to Jeremy and ask you a little bit about your journey. And we'll hear more, Phil, about your ownership of the 7 practices as well. But I want to hear a little bit more about your journey into entrepreneurship and serial brick and mortar practice ownership.
Yeah, I'm going to blame Phil on some of that, but ultimately I started off into emergency medicine, and then I always wanted to own my own practice. And then I had the opportunity to buy a GP practice, which around the same time Phil went from a brick and mortar to mobile is kind of when we connected and we worked together at the first practice I bought. And that's kind of where our working relationship and friendship started. So it's back 2009-ish, Phil, 2010-ish. In that,
2007.
Yeah, 7. Yeah, a
2007.
long time ago. A long time ago.
Yeah.
And then from there, Phil and I had the opportunity to co-own a brick and mortar practice together, a GP practice. And then it just kind of kept going from there. And then same thing, just the entrepreneurship, you just get excited, enjoy it, and keep saying yes, 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 until you're like, oh my God, this is a lot of work. Like, need to cut back a little bit, need the work-life balance again. And then, so I ended up selling 2 practices, one that we co-owned, and that's where we started Chronos. And then after I sold both of those, got bored and bought a 3rd practice.
Of course you did. Of course you did. People like us are not happy until things are insane, right?
Yeah.
It's a medical condition.
It's really a medical condition. I have it too. It's terrible. That's really funny. Yeah. And I mean, I know, Phil, I know you through some of your other brainchilds and your other entrepreneurial projects from other lives, even, beyond the house call stuff. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Very cool. So you guys are just such interesting guests on this show for so many reasons, but I'm just really interested to lean a little bit more into Chronos and to hear about your collaboration and developing that and why you developed it and what is it. And, most of my house call vet conference attendees know by now what Chronos does, but for folks who are just joining us, let's start with Jeremy. What is Chronos? And then, kind of how did it develop?
Yeah, I'd say how it developed is Phil and I, when we co-owned the GP practice, realized that one of the pain points was at the front desk, where your receptionists, who do a fantastic job, but only can wear so many hats at a time. Right. They're greeting clients, they're taking payments for clients who are finished up with their appointment while trying to juggle 4 people on hold. It's just not a feasible task for anybody to be really successful at. And then the customer service side of things really suffers. And so that's kind of how we started Chronos, and we started at our own practice first, made sure it was something that could work, and found out so many positives by having the reception out of the hospital and just focusing only on phone calls while your in-house team focuses strictly on clients. And then COVID happened a couple months after that, and it was the best thing for Chronos, worst thing for the world, but best thing for Chronos.
Yeah, understood. Yeah. And Phil, did you want to add anything to the evolution of Chronos and what you guys do?
Yeah, just to refine that a tiny bit. Chronos was never supposed to be a company. We strictly did it to help our receptionists who were drowning, again, between the live clients and the callers. So it's only after a few months of trying, because we invented every system from the ground up, that we realized how good it was and what a difference it made in the mental health of the team. Even financially, we experienced a 10% increase in revenue, 10% increase in revenue in the first month. Mm-hmm. We saw so many benefits that we thought we can't keep that to ourselves. We have to share with colleagues. So we started to talk to friends and connections, and COVID hit. And all of a sudden, when we had all the systems in place, when everybody was struggling to create the same systems, we were ready to go. To some degree, we're no geniuses. It was just dumb luck.
I don't think it was dumb luck, but I do love that this is a service, and a service that is created by 2 veterinarians who lived the need for this and developed it organically, like you said, that you didn't even mean to be a company. I think that's the most beautiful way that these kinds of things can develop, out of a true need and your own innovation to be able to solve the problem that you yourself have and understand deeply from the inside out, right? Nobody else but 2 vets who own practices are going to get this in the way that you guys do. And therefore, the way that it appears you've developed Chronos is really reflecting that. So I think that's really, really cool.
And the cool thing about it is, immediately as soon as the phones were taken off the front desk area, the CSRs, their stress level immediately dropped. They were much happier in their day. Clients were much happier. And then as a result, just everything worked better in the hospital. And it was like a magic pill from day one. And so it was pretty cool to see that transition. And then with the lower stress, you have lower turnover, lower burnout. There are just so many positives that came out of this that we never really anticipated.
Yeah. Oh, you can say that, Jeremy. We totally anticipated it. We knew.
Bill knew. Bill knew. I was a little skeptical.
Yeah. Yeah. So you guys basically now at this point, you're kind of training up people to do all different kinds of tasks, like answering the phones, and you have a scribe kind of service in progress, maybe. And you have people customize and learn each practice's systems, and you train them up to take pressure off of the team themselves to do it. Is that right?
Yeah, they're trained to our standards, which are really, really high, and they're trained to the standards of the practice, because even though we all do the same thing, we all do it differently.
Mm-hmm. And do you have vet students and vet techs, and who kind of is providing the support through Chronos for the practices?
We try and take the most skilled people in their fields. So we have technicians and CSRs, and minimum they have a 5 years of training and experience in the field. So we're not hiring somebody who's green off the streets who takes a lot of training. We're already hiring high quality individuals that can just jump right in, and some tweaks and some Chronos education, then we can get them onboarded pretty quickly and customized to the practice they're working for.
Very, very cool. And can you tell me a little bit more about the scribe aspect of things that you guys are working on? Has that unrolled yet?
Jeremy, again, tested it in our GP practice.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. We have used it as far as widespread adoption. We're still working on that, but the benefits to the clinic and especially in a role like mobile or house call veterinarians, it's pretty simple. And to start off, I just used a Bluetooth headpiece, had people on speakerphone, and then you have the person on the other end. At the time, it was a veterinary student who I had worked with previously who kind of understood the flow of things, and she was on the other end. So I was in Pennsylvania. She was at Tufts in Massachusetts, and she would type up my notes while I'm verbalizing the exam. Saved a ton of time, saved a lot of work at the end of the day trying to remember, was it the left leg or right leg that was limping?
Yeah.
Made me sound like
That's
a
always the
genius.
question.
Yeah. Clients would ask, well, how much is this heartworm medication or this flea and tick medication? And of course, I had no idea, but I'd have someone talking in my ear, oh, it's $50 for a 6-month supply, and maybe sound like a genius.
Man,
And
that's
so
cool. That's so cool. And how do you, I have just a kind of a question about the logistics of working with a scribe who's remote. So do you get the permission of the client in advance and say, I've got a scribe that's remote. Is it okay to record this session in real time? Or how do you kind of broach that subject with the client to let them know what you're doing? Or do you?
Yeah, it was simple because I had an earpiece in. So I'd just say, I have someone listening in just to help speed up my note process. And so I don't miss anything and be more accurate with my notes. And it was never really a concern.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a concern because it's not recorded.
Ah, okay. So it's literally in real time happening and there's no actual recording. Okay.
The beauty of it.
That's really cool. That's really cool. And I like that little kind of sentence. I've got an earpiece and someone's listening in on the call to help me with, and then you present the reason why it's beneficial for the client for this to even be happening to begin with. So you present it in a way that it even adds value rather than, will you allow me to record this? You're actually telling them why it's beneficial for not only you, but them. That's really cool. So are you guys going to recommended earpieces for folks working with Chronos through the scribe and stuff like that?
Yeah, certainly we can recommend some. I mean, when I started off, it was basic using WhatsApp and just a normal Bluetooth headset. So it was nothing fancy, nothing extra cost, super simple, but we can adapt it to whatever works for that person.
I love it. That's genius. You are geniuses, people. You said you weren't a genius, but you are. I beg to differ with that statement. So, yeah, I mean, that's really, really great. I mean, I'm curious. I've thought about a scribe for a while, but I have these long house calls and I languish and just luxuriate and talk to my clients for a long time. And the house call takes place over like an hour. Do you guys have any sort of like suggestions on how a house call vet might? Well, first of all, let me back up. How would your service be helpful for a house call vet, whether it's through scribes or through remote reception and stuff like that? How do you think this would help house call vets?
It's different things. And I can speak to the mobile aspect of the CSRs and maybe nurses later. So for the scribe, you said it, remember during the conference, you talked about slow medicine.
Yes.
That's the beauty of what you do. You can take your time and nurture the bond and so on and so forth. I can't even imagine how much record keeping you have on the back end. So the beauty of a scribe is you eliminate all that time typing notes. You should review the notes, but it saves you a ton of time typing because somebody does it for you. So it's much more accurate because, I mean, it would be really challenging to remember an hour's worth of a conversation with a client. I can't even remember after 5 minutes, so I don't know how you do it after an hour. So the whole point is to indirectly improve your quality of life by not having to do everything yourself. You know, your job is to do the consult. It shouldn't be to type notes. So if you can delegate that in real time, it saves you a lot of time.
Absolutely. I mean, damn, when you guys roll out the scribe thing, I will be your first to sign up for that.
We're ready.
All right, I'm on. Done.
And then you'll never have medical records as accurate and legally appropriate as with a scribe.
You know, I want to tell you that I did a survey. I've done numerous surveys of my house call vet community, and I asked them, of all the things that annoy you about being a house call vet or a vet in general, what are they? And I had, is it doing medical records? Is it traveling? Is it client communication? Is it ordering meds? By far and away, medical records was number one. By far and away, everyone hates medical records, no matter what your EMR, no matter whether you do the records in the appointment or after, no matter whether you write detailed or super brief records. Everyone hates writing medical. It's just paperwork nonsense. It's literally paperwork nonsense. And we all agree. And so that's one of so many reasons why I've been so excited to collaborate with you guys, because you guys know that and you have a solution. And I think that's kick-ass.
And the scribe can be a multitask person. It doesn't just have to be, because obviously in that hour you're doing more than just talking about the dog limping and what needs to be done. So they can be dealing with phone messages, refilling prescriptions, doing whatever else is needed, creating the invoice for that patient or whatever else you see fit.
Yeah, there are so many questions I want to ask you that we'll probably have to do offline just for the interest of time, because, you know, there's just so many cool aspects of this and ways that this can be helpful for our community. I wanted to kind of pivot for a little bit and go back into the subject of practice ownership, since you guys both have tremendous experience with practice ownership in a variety of contexts. So I first wanted to ask you, Phil, a little bit more about your traveling mobile services. How does that, in general terms, how does like a day in the life look from the entrepreneurial business back end to the clinical? If you could sort of like do a whirlwind outline of a day in the life.
So that actually ties into the CSR part very well, because that's changed my life. Cool. So as a solo surgeon, it usually goes like this. You prepare all the equipment in the morning, on a good day the night before, but that has been wishful thinking. Then you drive to the first practice, set up, do the surgery, wrap up, move on to the next practice until you're done. And then you
how many practices or surgeries are you doing per day on average?
So it totally depends. Every day is different. So, you know, a really good day is when you have 2 or 3 surgeries at the same practice. It doesn't always work out that way. So depending on the distance, just like on the house call side, you can visit more or less practices. So 2, 3, 4, it all depends on the distance. And also the duration of the surgery, also how prepared they are at the clinic, et cetera, et cetera.
And you're doing orthopedics and then soft tissue and all of it, the whole gamut?
All of it.
And do you bring a tech with you? Your own surgery tech?
So that's been part of the evolution. Initially, no, I was truly a solo surgeon. When I finally saw the light, I did bring a technician with me to handle a lot of the stuff I was doing, including setting up and wrapping up and cleaning instruments and surgery report, discharge instructions, etc. So that was extremely helpful and probably made me 25% more efficient. And then the icing on the cake, when I saw the second light and worked with a referral coordinator, that took hours out of each day. So, you know, after every day, I had to take care of paperwork, instruments, calling clients, coordinating with referring clinics, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a huge waste of time. And it took me years to understand how beneficial it would be to delegate, because we all have an issue with delegation, right?
It's very hard to delegate. It's very hard to trust that anyone else but ourselves could possibly do the job right, right?
Absolutely. So, it's the same situation with the house call vet, dealing with paperwork and ordering and record keeping and emails and phone calls and messages. It's endless. So the beauty of delegating to somebody who can do all these things just as well, if not better, to be honest, is a huge time saver. And we feel very strongly that it improves quality of life. I mean, we all talk about work-life balance. That's probably why many people go into house call situations. The last thing you should do is spend all your time on email and EMR and returning calls, right?
Yeah, and it's sort of interesting because somewhat the basis of the House Call Vet Academy that I teach my participants who are either building their house call practices or revamping or leveling up and trying to find a better balance. The thing that I've observed, not only in my experience, but in everyone else's experience, is that the default is that the nonsense will take over. You start the whole thing for work-life balance, and then entrepreneurship becomes this monster, and it takes over all the paperwork, the emails, the invoicing, the client communicate, everything, unless you have a specific plan or a specific approach to prevent it. That is going to happen inevitably to every business owner. Doesn't matter whether it's house call, doesn't matter whether it's mobile surgery, it doesn't matter if you're the owner of a brick and mortar. That is like the law of entropy or whatever it's called. Everything devolves into chaos. And unless you have an actual plan or a system or something like Chronos, which is designed to help with the specific issues that practice owners deal with and veterinarians deal with, it will become chaos. It's just a matter of time. If it hasn't yet, it will. I promise. And I think it's just really important for people to know that. And I think it's been really it's one of the greatest joys for me to see people be able to prevent that. Like, you see it starting to happen, and then with systems and approaches and support of the right nature, people can avoid it and they can kind of crisis avert it, and they don't have to go down that path.
Yeah. And the problem is that the busier you get, the worse it becomes. It's a snowball effect, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, you want your business busy. You want to earn a good income. You want to be profitable, but you also need to be actively engaged in how to make sure it's sustainable, because the more profitable you get, the sustainability goes down without a plan, right?
Yeah, and you're so right. It is exactly the same as in a brick and mortar general practice or not. You get busier, there's more and more admin tasks that creep up. There's more management that comes up. And at some point, you own a job, you don't own a business.
That's
So
exactly right.
the whole purpose of delegating to a nurse or CSR is to take off all these tasks that you shouldn't be doing. You should be diagnosing and managing and strategizing, not doing these things. And I'm not saying that in a condescending way.
Right.
I'd be the first one to tell you that my nurse does a better job than I do.
Nice.
So
yeah,
thank God she does it.
That's awesome. Yeah, my vet techs, I have 2 vet techs that I work with in a variety of contexts, and they do a shit ton of things better than I do. We'll put it that way. So I'm right there with you on that. And I think, we're not all good at everything. Like, I got the brainy, cerebral diagnosing and, client communication thing going on, but there's plenty that I don't trust myself with. And that's where my techs come in. And I love that I can delegate to them, but it's hard. It's hard. I'm curious if either of you guys have any advice for folks. I have a general question about practice ownership. Any tips for other practice owners? And I wanted to ask, for folks who are afraid to delegate, people who feel they can't trust some of these tasks to be given away to somebody else, how would you soothe their fears and concerns about that? And, any sort of words of wisdom for someone who's like, holding my precious, I can't let anyone do any of my things, because that can be the kiss of death for a business owner at times. So how would you kind of talk to someone who might be feeling that way?
Well, if you think about it, even the most controlling, micromanaging GP in a brick and mortar practice usually doesn't answer the phone. And usually, I insist, usually doesn't do the ordering and usually doesn't do too many nursing tasks. Usually.
And start small. So start small with a task that you think someone else can do a good job with, and then start small and then start to gain confidence that other people can do things just as well as we can and oftentimes better, and then keep building from there. And it's hard. It's a really hard thing to start letting go and trusting other people to take care of things, because inevitably someone's not going to do a good job. You're going to have turnover. You're going to have to train somebody else to do it. So there are challenges, but overall, it's going to lead to a better quality of life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you bring up a good point. Sometimes you find not a good match and then people get burned and then they feel they can never trust again. So it's hard. But when you find the right match, which is hard to do, but when you find the right match, it can make all the difference in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that's part of our magic. We don't assign a random person to a random practice. We try to match personalities and styles and that kind of stuff. Just one final thought. I was the biggest offender. It took me years to relinquish all these tasks.
Same.
Because nobody could answer the phone better than I do, which is the stupidest idea I ever had. It doesn't make any sense. Jeremy has a good point. Start small. If you hate record keeping, maybe that's where you should start. Start with a scribe who can double up as a nurse and a CSR if it happens to be a technician.
Very, very cool. Yeah, bite size, like kind of relinquish a little control in bite size chunks, right? Until you start to feel comfortable. Cool. I love it.
Going back to your other question, as far as new practice owners, is setting some time aside to work on the practice and not just in the practice. And that's probably the hardest thing to do, because after seeing a day's worth or a week worth of appointments, you get so caught up into, I got to call Mrs. Jones about Fluffy, but you forget about the direction the practice is going. How can you help this technician do better with this, or another task that you can help guide somebody on? And then you kind of lose sight of your goals, your scorecard, your focus onto your KPIs and those sort of things. And then you can spiral out of control pretty quickly.
Oh yeah. So very true. So I mean you're kind of talking about some of the Peter Weinstein stuff from his book, which I'm blanking. What is the book called? Damn it.
The E-Myth.
The E-Myth Veterinarian. Yeah. So the phenomena in the E-Myth Veterinarian are so integral to having a successful practice. I so agree with you that you have to work on the business, not just in the business. And like you said, Phil, your practice can become a job, or you can become a servant or slave of your own practice rather than I think Michael E. Gerber, I think he might have, stated it, that you can become a technician rather than, and not a veterinary technician, but just someone who's technically carrying out the crap, the everyday crap of the business, and it owns you rather than you owning it. And, all of that is so very integral, I think, to having a successful, profitable, and sustainable business, whether it's a brick and mortar or a house call practice. So thank you so much for saying that, Jeremy. I think that's an incredibly important point. And how does that look for you when you work on the business? Do you have certain days that are like admin days, or the mornings are for admin, the afternoons are for working in the practice? Is there any sort of system that you have to integrate that phenomenon?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I'm the brick and mortar practice I own. I'm a 50% co-owner. And so I'm mentoring the other person who owns it, as she's a newer grad. And so she's still learning all the ins and outs. So I try to avoid appointments altogether, and I'm more of a fill-in doctor for vacation, other situations like that. So I just try and, again, work on the Chronos side of things, work on the administration tasks, and try and mentor in that fashion. So I try and set as much time aside as I can. And I have cutoff points that at this time of the day, I'm done. It's time to go home, family time.
Boundaries. Okay, cool. Very, very cool.
Not easy. There's nothing easy, and I break those boundaries, unfortunately, too frequently, but I try.
Don't we all know it? Don't we all know it? Boundaries are, I mean, one of my favorite topics, but I mean, I'll be the first to admit I'm not just a teacher of boundaries. I'm very much a student of them. I have to work all the time. It's a lifelong project, and I know I'm not the only one. So I hear you on that, very much so. It's a work in progress for us all. What about you, Phil? Do you have any sort of general practice ownership tips for folks?
Well, I don't think we're going to have enough time. So,
lay it on me. I want to hear it.
Well, yeah, I definitely tend to do this on the non-surgery days. There's no way I can do any kind of management on a surgery day. Besides, phone calls here and there with referring vets. I do think it's important to carve out times any way you can, whenever it fits your lifestyle, morning, afternoon, evening, weekends, ideally not weekends. So you have enough time to do it. If you don't carve out the time, that's the first thing that goes by the wayside every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so do you end up, how many days a week do you usually do surgery, and how many days a week do you end up kind of working on the business?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So it
Or
went
is it
from,
different? It's always different. That's okay too.
well, it literally, and I'm not exaggerating, went from 7 days and 7 nights to 6, 5, to 4, to 3, and now 2.
Okay. Okay. Mad respect for that. I think that's good. That's a
Yeah.
great thing.
So that's been a long, difficult journey.
Mhm.
And now I have more time to dedicate to the surgery practice of things as well as Chronos.
Mhm. I think that's such a valid and good point and trajectory to kind of highlight that in business, and I think in medicine and a lot of aspects of life, less is more, right? We always think more, more, more. I need another practice. I need to add more surgery days. I need to have more clients. I need to have more, 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 more. I need to do more things, right? And then it turns out, just like with multitasking, when you're doing too many things at once, none of the individual projects are done as well as they could be, or with as much satisfaction and presence of mind and ultimate, like a sense of accomplishment and just like a sense of well-being about the whole thing. So I've seen it's happened to me. I've seen it happen to so many of my house call vet participants. You reduce things. You maybe stop taking so many clients. You raise the price, take fewer clients. I didn't mean to have thumbs down. I meant to say less. You make it less, simplify, less is more, the same with animals, right? And I think it's unbelievably such a hard lesson for us to learn. So many of us vets, I think, are used to more, taking on more and wanting to do more. And I think to some extent that's a byproduct of being intelligent and highly educated, that the world has so many things to do and people to help and projects and entrepreneurial endeavors that we want to do it all. But ultimately, going down to 2 days is the healthier thing, probably for you and the patients and the businesses. And I have a lot of thoughts about that. And it sort of ties in also with the slow medicine. Less is more, slower is faster, right? It's so many of these conundrums in business, right?
No question about it. And it's also to some degree how we were trained. I mean, when I did my residency, the mantra was, we never refuse a case. And I lived by that mantra for years.
Oh, that's god awful.
But that led me to this never-ending spiral where I ended up working 7 days and 7 nights because I could never refuse a patient, ever.
I relate to that very, very much. Having done a surgical residency as well and having turned away from that path, I know that mentality so well. I never heard that actual mantra, and it makes me cringe hearing it, but I know the mentality of that. And you're absolutely right. As veterinarians, we were trained that way, not just in residency and internship, but from vet school. I think that's the mentality that has been put into all of us. And I think if we didn't already have some of that in us, it was put there through our training. So it's absolutely right. Absolutely. And we're all in the process of undoing some of that, right? For our own well-being and for the well-being of our patients and just to be healthy humans, right? Which is ultimately the most important thing. So we've delved into so many interesting topics. I want to just open it up a little bit to each of you. Is there anything else that you'd like people to know about you or about Chronos before we close up shop for the day?
I think we had a fantastic talk. I mean, I really, really appreciate all the great questions and digging deep into Chronos and how we can help. And I think by sponsoring your event a month or so ago, it really just helped open our world to house call vets. And I think it's been a pretty good match of the ones that we've started working with. It's really worked out very well on both ends. And I think we're a perfect fit for each other.
Fantastic. Love it. How about you, Phil?
Yeah, we've mostly talked about the vets, our clients side of things. I just wanted to say a word about our CSRs and scribes and nurses. I've worked with a lot of people in different endeavors in our field, and our employees, I think it's fair to say that they're the happiest, most positive, most thankful veterinary professionals I've ever met. And they all have different stories. The reason they work remotely is for a variety of reasons. many family, kids, parents, personal reasons, they're all broken after so many years of crawling on the floor and carrying heavy patients. So when we participate in our staff meetings, we call each other every meeting, and I'm not exaggerating. We say, "Oh my God, this was the best meeting ever," because they're so positive and so thankful that, several have said that we saved their lives because without Chronos, they would be working in some other field that they don't really enjoy because their world is the vet world. So that's really what one of my biggest joys at this point is, to serve our clients and make a difference in their lives, but also help our employees stay in the field and be happy, whereas they weren't happy before.
Thank you so much for saying that. That makes me so happy to hear. And Phil and I spoke at length about this very subject before I accepted sponsorship from Chronos. I vet my sponsors very diligently, and it's very important to me that anyone that's sponsoring what I do or what we do is acting ethically on behalf of their employees, and that this is an ethical business. And we spoke at great length about how you guys are really supporting the employees and doing the right thing by them as well as by the clients. And so I love that you mentioned that. It makes me very happy to see companies that are saying they do that and actually doing it, because there's a difference, right? So thank you for doing both. And thank you for bringing that up. I think that's an incredibly important aspect of kind of our collaboration. So thanks again for sharing that. Thank you, Jeremy and Phil. You've been wonderful today. In closing, I want to ask you both, what is your favorite beverage? Since we do happen to be in a cafe right now, what would you like to order, Jeremy? From the bar to the cafe.
That's tough. I like my coffee black, so I'm on the East Coast time, so we're a little bit later, and so I also have visions of starting a winery. So I'm planting a lot of grapevines, and I've made a couple 100 gallons of wine from fresh grapes. So I'd have to go with a dry Riesling at this point.
WTF? Oh my God! Okay, that's so cool.
See the importance of the work-life balance. So that's my balance.
Love it. We'll have to continue this conversation off the air. How about you, Phil?
So my answer is going to be much less sexy. It's mostly water, but the water has to be high quality.
Okay. And what is high quality water to you? Is it like how it's filtered, or?
So I'm super sensitive to the taste of water.
Okay.
So there's some waters I just would never drink because I don't enjoy the taste. So yeah, Jeremy's answer is a much better one.
No, that's hilarious. That's actually really funny. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you both for being with me today, and just super excited about our collaboration with Chronos. And thanks for sharing your insights about business ownership and delegating and working on the business, et cetera, et cetera. I can't wait to continue our conversation off the air.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the House Call Vet Cafe. If you enjoyed this episode, then hit the subscribe or follow button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never have to miss an episode. This podcast is made specifically for you, so don't be shy if you'd like to reach out and let me know your thoughts on this episode. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook as The House Call Vet Academy, where I also share more valuable content. If you're interested in learning more about consulting for House Call Vets or the House Call Vet Academy online course and community, please click on the link in the show notes. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I can't wait for you to join us for our next episode of the House Call Vet Cafe.
If you're looking for help with ultrasound scanning, check out First Opinion Veterinary Ultrasound for independent machine reviews and online and in-person teaching options. FOVU, simplifying ultrasound.